The summer sun beat down on Northwood, turning the already cracked asphalt into a shimmering mirage. 10-year-old Elijah knew every crevice, every uneven patch, every discarded wrapper on these streets. His world was a kaleidoscope of vibrant murals on crumbling brick walls, the rhythmic bounce of basketballs in the park, and the ever-present hum of distant traffic from the interstate, a sound that always felt like opportunity passing him by. Elijah was small for his age, but his eyes held an ancient wisdom, a quiet determination forged in the crucible of his circumstances. His clothes, though clean, were faded hand-me-downs, and his worn sneakers had seen more miles than a cross-country runner. Every morning, before the heat became truly oppressive, he'd be out, not for play, but for purpose. Today, that purpose was hauling a rickety red wagon, its wheels protesting with every turn, filled with aluminum cans he'd meticulously collected. Each clinking addition was a whisper of hope. More money for groceries, a few extra dollars to help his mama pay the light bill, maybe, just maybe, enough left over for that science kit he'd been eyeing at the dollar store. His mama, Sarah, worked 2 jobs, cleaning offices downtown and waitressing late into the night at a diner on the outskirts of town. She was a force of nature, resilient and loving, but the strain-etched lines around her eyes that Elijah noticed, even if he didn't fully understand their depth. He did understand, however, that every little bit helped. He was the man of the house, in his own small way, since his father had passed when he was just 5. "Eli, you hurry back now here," Mama had called out that morning, her voice thick with fatigue but laced with her usual unwavering affection. "Yes, Mama," he'd shouted back, the screen door slapping shut behind him. He navigated the familiar maze of streets, his sharp eyes scanning gutters and alleyways. He knew the prime spots, behind Ms. Ruby's corner store, near the park benches where folks sometimes left their empty sodas, and especially the recycling bins of the wealthier neighborhood just 3 blocks over. A world away in terms of manicured lawns and silent, gleaming cars. That was his next stop. The transition from Northwood's bustling, often chaotic energy to the hushed, tree-lined avenues of Crestwood was abrupt. The air here felt cooler, cleaner, laden with the scent of freshly cut grass and blooming hydrangeas. The houses stood like silent, proud sentinels, each one a testament to fortunes unimaginable to Elijah. He always felt a strange mix of awe and unease here. He was a ghost, almost invisible, his wagon's creaks the only disruption to the serene quiet. He often wondered what it would be like to live in a house with a pool, a lawn so green it looked painted, and a garage filled with cars that didn't rattle or smoke. He didn't resent it, he just observed, a silent anthropologist in a foreign land. He was making good progress, the wagon getting heavier, the sun climbing higher. He had just rounded a particularly grand cul-de-sac, admiring a rosebush that seemed to defy gravity with its vibrant blooms, when he saw it. A sleek, black Mercedes-Benz, the kind he only ever saw in movies, was pulled awkwardly to the side of the road, its front passenger tire completely deflated, lying flat and forlorn against the curb. A man, impeccably dressed in a suit that looked like it cost more than Elijah's entire apartment building, stood beside it, an exasperated sigh escaping his lips. He was older, perhaps in his late 50s or early 60s, with a distinguished mane of silver hair and a sharp, angular face that currently held a look of utter frustration. He was talking into a phone, his voice a low rumble that carried even across the perfectly manicured lawn. Elijah hesitated. Instinct told him to keep moving. People in this neighborhood didn't usually interact with kids like him, especially when they were pushing a wagon full of cans. They didn't want their pristine peace disturbed, but something held him back. The man looked genuinely distressed, and Elijah's mama had always taught him, if you can help someone, Eli, you help them. Doesn't matter who they are or what they got. He took a deep breath, adjusted his grip on the wagon handle, and slowly approached. The man, Mr. Alistair Sterling, was indeed frustrated. He was late for a crucial board meeting, a meeting that could determine the fate of his latest multi-million-dollar acquisition. His driver, Jenkins, had called in sick with a stomach bug that morning, leaving Alistair, against his better judgment, to drive himself. He prided himself on efficiency, on being prepared, on anticipating every contingency. A flat tire, especially on a quiet suburban street, felt like a personal affront from the universe. "No, I don't need a tow truck, just someone to change the tire," he barked into his phone, his patience wearing thin. "Yes, I know it's a simple task, but the spare is jammed and my hands are getting filthy. Just send someone competent and quickly." He slammed the phone shut, glancing down at his pristine white shirt, now smudged with grease from his futile attempts to loosen the lug nuts. He wasn't accustomed to physical labor, especially not the kind that involved grime and sweat. His world consisted of boardrooms, private jets, and the hushed efficiency of his highly trained staff. This was undignified. It was then he noticed the boy, small, dark-skinned, pushing a wagon overflowing with what looked like trash. Alistair's immediate, regrettable thought was a dismissive one. Another kid scavenging, probably looking for something to pawn. He braced himself for a request for money, a common occurrence in certain parts of the city. He sighed inwardly. He just wanted this ordeal over with. "Excuse me, sir." Elijah's voice was soft, hesitant, but clear. Alistair looked up, surprised. The boy wasn't holding out his hand. He was looking at the tire, then at Alistair's troubled face with an expression of genuine concern. "Yes, son?" Alistair asked, his tone brusque despite himself. "Looks like you got a flat," Elijah observed, stating the obvious. "Need some help?" Alistair blinked. Help? From this kid? He was about to politely decline, maybe offer a few dollars to make him go away, when he saw something in Elijah's eyes. Not pity, not a desire for a handout, but a quiet competence, a willingness. "Do you know anything about changing a tire?" Alistair asked, skepticism lacing his voice. Elijah nodded, a slight flush rising on his cheeks. "My Uncle Ben taught me. He used to drive a tow truck. Said every man should know how to change a tire, even if he drives a fancy car." He gestured vaguely at the Mercedes. "Sometimes the jack can be tricky or the lug nuts get stuck." Alistair stared at him. The boy spoke clearly, articulately, without the slang he often heard from kids on the street. And the mention of a tricky jack. That was exactly his problem. He'd wrestled with the contraption for 10 minutes, convinced it was broken. He looked at his watch. His meeting was starting in 15 minutes, and his competent help was still 20 minutes away, according to the dispatcher. What did he have to lose? "All right, kid," Alistair said, a hint of curiosity creeping into his tone. "Show me what you got, but be careful with my car." Elijah's face lit up. He pulled his wagon a few feet away, tucking it neatly against a lamppost, out of the way. Then, with an almost professional air, He approached the Mercedes. "First thing," Elijah said, his voice gaining confidence, "we gotta make sure the car ain't gonna roll. Is the parking brake on, sir?" Alistair, surprisingly, found himself answering, "Yes, it is." "Good," Elijah nodded. He knelt, not minding the dusty ground, and peered under the car. "See? This jack? It's a little different than Uncle Ben's, but the principle's the same. You gotta find the right spot under the frame, otherwise it'll just slip." He pointed with a small, dirt-smudged finger. "Looks like you were trying to put it on the suspension arm. That's no good." Alistair felt a flicker of surprise. The boy was right. He had been trying to jam the jack under what looked like a solid metal bar, but it hadn't felt right. Elijah, without waiting for permission, reached into the trunk and pulled out the wrench Alistair had discarded in frustration. "These lug nuts look tight," he mused, then looked at Alistair. "You got a little more muscle than me, sir. Maybe if you get 'em started, I can finish 'em up." Alistair hesitated for a moment, then, driven by a strange blend of urgency and a growing respect for the boy's unexpected expertise, he took the wrench. With a grunt, he leaned into it, and this time, guided by Elijah's precise instructions, "Put your foot here, sir, for leverage." The first lug nut gave way with a screech, then another and another. Once the nuts were loosened, Elijah took over. His small hands, though not as strong, were nimble and precise. He spun the nuts off one by one, dropping them carefully into the hubcap so they wouldn't get lost. Then, with a practiced maneuver, he worked the jack, slowly raising the car. He explained each step as he went, almost as if he were teaching Alistair. "Gotta go slow, sir, nice and steady. Don't want the car to wobble." Alistair found himself watching, captivated. The boy worked with an intensity and focus that belied his age. There was no complaining, no grumbling, just quiet, efficient action. He observed Elijah's brow furrow in concentration, the way his dark, curly hair stuck to his forehead with sweat, the dirt smudges on his knees, and the sheer dedication in his movements. This wasn't a performance. This was just who Elijah was. Finally, the flat tire was off. Elijah rolled it away, then wrestled the spare into place. It was a tight fit, and he grunted with effort, but he didn't give up. Alistair, without thinking, leaned down and offered a hand to help steady the wheel as Elijah aligned the bolts. Their hands, one soft and unblemished, the other calloused and dirt-stained, briefly touched. Then came the reverse process, tightening the lug nuts, lowering the car, and finally rolling the tools back into the trunk. Elijah wiped his hands on his worn jeans, leaving fresh streaks of grease, but a triumphant grin spread across his face. "There you go, sir," he announced, stepping back to admire his work. "Good as new." Alistair stared at the reinflated tire, then at the boy, who stood before him, beaming with pride. The whole process had taken less than 15 minutes, far faster than he could have managed alone, and certainly faster than any professional would have arrived. He reached into his wallet, pulling out a crisp $50 bill. It was a generous amount, more than enough for a simple act of assistance, but Alistair felt it was woefully inadequate for the unexpected lesson he had just received. "Thank you, son," Alistair said, his voice surprisingly soft. He extended the bill. "Here, for your trouble." Elijah looked at the 50, his eyes widening for a fleeting moment. It was a lot of money, more than he usually made in 2 days of collecting cans. But then he hesitated. "No, sir," he said, shaking his head. "That's okay. Mama says you help people because it's the right thing to do, not for money. Alistair's jaw dropped slightly. He'd encountered countless people in his life who would do anything for $1, let alone 50. This boy, covered in grime from helping a stranger, was refusing payment. Nonsense, Alistair insisted, pushing the bill closer. You worked hard. Take it. Elijah took a step back. Really, it's fine, sir. Just glad I could help you get to where you needed to go. He glanced at his watch, a subtle movement, then looked back at Alistair. You looked like you were in a hurry. Alistair stared at the boy, truly seeing him for the first time. The faded clothes, the worn shoes, the wagon full of cans that now seemed less like scavenging and more like diligent labor. This wasn't a child looking for an easy buck. This was a child of integrity, of quiet dignity, whose actions spoke louder than any words. He realized the boy probably needed that money more than Alistair needed a clean shirt. What's your name, son? Alistair asked, lowering the hand holding the money. Elijah. Elijah Carter. Elijah, Alistair repeated, testing the name. Well, Elijah, I am Alistair Sterling, and I insist, not as payment, but as a token of my sincere gratitude. You saved my meeting, and frankly, you taught me a thing or two about humility. He folded the 50 and gently pressed it into Elijah's hand. Please, take it. Elijah's fingers closed around the bill. He looked at Alistair, then back at the 50, then at his own grimy hands. A small smile, almost shy, touched his lips. Thank you, Mr. Sterling. That's really kind of you. Alistair felt a warmth spread through him, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. The relentless pursuit of success had hardened him, made him wary, often cynical. But this small, unassuming boy had cut through all of it with a simple act of selfless kindness. Elijah, Alistair began, a new idea forming in his mind. Where do you live? And what are you doing out here collecting cans? He immediately regretted the bluntness of the second question, but it was out. Elijah, however, didn't seem offended. I live in Northwood, sir. Just a few blocks over, and I collect cans to help my mama. She works real hard and every bit helps. He gestured to the overflowing wagon. I'm heading to the recycling center now. Northwood, Alistair mused. He knew of Northwood, of course. It was a stark contrast to Crestwood, a place he only ever drove past, never through. You're a good boy, Elijah Carter, Alistair said, a genuine smile replacing his earlier frustration. He pulled out a business card from his wallet, a thick, expensive-looking card with gold lettering. This is my card. My office number is on it. If you ever need anything at all, you call this number. Ask for me directly. He pressed the card into Elijah's other hand. Promise me you will. Elijah stared at the card. It felt smooth and cool against his palm. The name, Alistair Sterling, meant nothing to him beyond the fancy car and suit, but the gesture felt significant. I promise, sir, he said, carefully putting the card in his pocket next to the $50 bill. Now, Alistair said, straightening his suit jacket, I really must be going. Thank you again, Elijah. Truly. He got back into his Mercedes, the powerful engine purring to life. Elijah watched as the black car smoothly pulled away from the curb, a tiny ripple in the quiet affluence of Crestwood. He stood there for a moment, the weight of the $50 bill and the smooth card in his pocket. It felt like a dream. He picked up the handle of his wagon, the metallic clinking of the cans suddenly sounding like music. The sun still beat down, but the heat felt different now, less oppressive, more like a warm embrace. "Well, I'll be," he muttered to himself, a wide grin breaking across his face. $50. Mama's gonna be so happy." He started walking towards the recycling center, but his mind wasn't on the cans anymore. It was on the silver-haired man, Mr. Alistair Sterling, and the strange, unexpected kindness he had shown. And a little piece of him wondered about that business card. "If you ever need anything, anything at all." Alistair Sterling drove away from the curb, the hum of his Mercedes a familiar comfort, but his mind was anything but settled. The urgency of his board meeting had receded, replaced by the image of Elijah's earnest face, his small, diligent hands, and the quiet dignity with which he refused payment. $50. It was less than what Alistair spent on his morning coffee most days. Yet, for Elijah, he knew it was a fortune, and the boy had tried to refuse it. That simple act had struck a chord deep within Alistair, a chord that had been silent for far too long. His life was a monument to ambition. From humble beginnings, he had clawed his way to the top of the financial world, building Sterling Innovations into a global powerhouse. He was respected, feared, admired. He had mansions, private jets, and a fortune that few could even comprehend. But somewhere along the relentless climb, he had lost something. The human connection, the simple joy of helping, the unvarnished truth of a selfless act. His interactions were usually transactional, driven by profit margins and strategic alliances. He thought of his own childhood, growing up in a working-class neighborhood, far from the polished streets of Crestwood. He remembered his own father, a mechanic, who would often help neighbors with their car troubles for nothing more than a handshake and a cup of coffee. He'd forgotten that world, forgotten the quiet nobility of simple acts of kindness. Elijah was a stark reminder of the world he had left behind, a world where resourcefulness was a necessity and generosity was an unspoken currency. He had expected a handshake, maybe a quick thank you, and then to be on his way. He had not expected to be genuinely moved. The boy's comment about his mama, working hard, needing help, it gnawed at Alistair. He had seen the wagon full of cans, understood the implication. Elijah wasn't just a kind kid. He was a child shouldering responsibilities far beyond his years. He arrived at the Sterling Innovations headquarters, a towering glass and steel edifice that dominated the city skyline. His assistant, Brenda, was waiting, her expression a mix of relief and barely concealed exasperation. "Mr. Sterling, thank heavens. We were beginning to worry. The board is assembled. The Holbrook acquisition is on the agenda." Alistair nodded, but his mind was still miles away, on a quiet street with a boy named Elijah. "Brenda," he said, surprising her, "before I go in, can you do something for me?" "Of course, Mr. Sterling. Anything. I need you to find someone for me. A boy named Elijah Carter. He lives in Northwood. He helped me with a flat tire this morning. Small kid, maybe 10 years old, pushes a red wagon, collects cans." Alistair paused, then added, "See if you can find his family. Discreetly, of course. I want to know what their situation is." Brenda's eyebrows arched slightly. In the 10 years she had worked for Alistair Sterling, she had never received such an unusual request. He was a man of business, sharp and ruthless. Philanthropy, for him, was usually a tax-deductible endeavor, carefully planned and executed. This felt different, personal. "Northwood, Mr. Sterling, and just a name and age?" Brenda asked, trying to keep her voice neutral. That might be challenging. I'm aware, Alistair said, his voice firm. But I have a good feeling about this, Brenda. Use your resources. I want to know everything you can find without being intrusive. And for goodness sake, make sure this doesn't get into the press. This is strictly private. Understood, Mr. Sterling, Brenda replied, already mentally strategizing. I'll get right on it after the meeting. Alistair nodded and strode towards the boardroom, his mind already shifting gears to the complex world of finance. But even as he debated quarterly reports and market projections, a small persistent voice at the back of his mind kept whispering, Elijah Carter, Northwood. The meeting passed in a blur of numbers and projections. Alistair, despite his internal distraction, performed flawlessly, closing the deal with his characteristic precision. But as soon as the last board member had departed, he returned to his office, his gaze immediately falling on his phone. Brenda entered a few minutes later, a folder in her hand. Her expression was a mix of concern and confirmation. You work fast, Brenda, Alistair said, leaning back in his leather chair. I have excellent contacts, Mr. Sterling, she replied, opening the folder. Elijah Carter, age 10, resides at 14, B. Willow Street, Northwood, with his mother, Sarah Carter. She's a widow. Her husband, David Carter, passed away 5 years ago from a sudden illness. Sarah works 2 jobs, as a cleaning supervisor for City Light Services and as a waitress at the Golden Spoon Diner. It appears they are struggling, Mr. Sterling. The building they live in is not well maintained. Public records show a history of late rent payments, though they always seem to catch up. Alistair listened, his expression grim. It was exactly as he had suspected. The boy's quiet strength wasn't just a personality trait. It was a necessary survival skill. Are there any other family members involved? Alistair asked. One uncle, Benjamin Carter, his father's brother. He lives upstate. Appears to be a mechanic and a truck driver. He visits when he can, but it's not frequent. So it's just Elijah and his mother? Alistair murmured, the weight of the information settling on him. He remembered Elijah saying, My Uncle Ben taught me. It made sense now. Mr. Sterling, Brenda ventured, if you're considering assistance, there are several charitable organizations we could funnel donations through. It would be entirely anonymous, and they have established programs for families in need. Alistair held up a hand. No, Brenda, not this time. This isn't a tax write-off. This is different. He paused, looking out his panoramic window at the city stretching below. I want to meet Sarah Carter. I want to see their home. Brenda's eyes widened slightly. Mr. Sterling, with all due respect, that might be uncomfortable for them and for you. It's not your usual approach. Precisely, Alistair said, turning his gaze back to her, his silver eyes unyielding. It's not. But neither was changing a tire on the side of the road with the help of a 10-year-old boy. Arrange a visit. Tomorrow. Perhaps in the late afternoon, when his mother is likely to be home from her first job, but before her second. Brenda nodded, closing the folder. She knew better than to argue when Alistair Sterling had made up his mind. This was a new side to her formidable boss, one she found both perplexing and oddly intriguing. Very well, Mr. Sterling. I'll make the arrangements. As she left, Alistair leaned back, a new kind of purpose forming in his mind. He had spent a lifetime accumulating wealth, power, and influence. But the brief, unexpected encounter with Elijah had reminded him that there were other currencies in the world, more valuable and more enduring than any stock market could measure. And he suddenly felt an overwhelming urge to invest in something truly worthwhile. The next afternoon, Elijah was at the small, wobbly kitchen table, painstakingly drawing a solar system. He loved science, loved how everything fit together, how distant planets moved in perfect orbits. It was a comfort to him, a world of order in a life that often felt chaotic. He was trying to draw Saturn's rings with a crayon that was rapidly shrinking. His mama Sarah was humming softly as she prepared a meager dinner of rice and beans. She was tired, the day's cleaning job having taken its toll, but her movements were still graceful, her smile, when she glanced at Elijah, still radiant. "Got a good haul today, Mama," Elijah said, pushing the $50 bill across the table. He'd carefully folded it into a tiny square. "Mr. Sterling, the man with the fancy car, he gave it to me. Said it was for helping him with his flat tire." Sarah stopped stirring, her eyes falling on the bill, her brows furrowed. $50, Eli? For a flat tire? She knew her son was helpful, but this seemed excessive. "Are you sure he wasn't just giving you charity, baby?" Her voice was soft, but the underlying pride she had in her son meant she never wanted him to feel like a handout. "No, Mama, he said it was for gratitude. He even tried to give it to me first, but I told him Uncle Ben says you help people because it's right, not for money." But he insisted. He said I saved his meeting, and he gave me his business card. Elijah proudly produced the gold-embossed card from his pocket, flattening it on the table. Sarah picked up the card. "Alistair Sterling," she read, her voice tinged with surprise. The name sounded important, and the quality of the card confirmed it. "Well, I'll be. You really helped a big shot, didn't you, baby?" She smiled, shaking her head. "All right, you keep that card, and this money will help us big time, Eli. You're a blessing, you know that?" Elijah beamed. Hearing his mama say that was better than any science kit. Just then, there was a knock on the door. Not the usual quick rap of a neighbor or the mailman, but a firm, deliberate set of knocks. Sarah looked at Elijah, a flicker of apprehension in her eyes. They didn't get many unexpected visitors. "Who is it?" she called out, moving towards the door, Elijah trailing behind her, his crayon still clutched in his hand. "Sarah Carter? My name is Alistair Sterling. I'm here to speak with you about your son, Elijah." Sarah froze. Alistair Sterling? The millionaire from the fancy car? Why was he here? Her heart began to pound with a mixture of fear and confusion. Had Elijah done something wrong? Had he accidentally damaged the car? No, that couldn't be it. He was so careful. She slowly opened the door, just a crack, peering out. Standing on their small, chipped porch was indeed the man from Elijah's story, impeccably dressed in a suit, looking somewhat out of place against the peeling paint of the doorframe and the cluttered stoop. Beside him stood a stern-faced woman in a smart business suit, Brenda, Alistair's assistant. "Mr. Sterling?" Sarah asked, her voice barely a whisper. What can I do for you?" Alistair offered a polite, almost formal smile. "Mrs. Carter, it's a pleasure to meet you. My name is Alistair Sterling. This is my assistant, Brenda. Your son Elijah was kind enough to help me with a rather troublesome flat tire yesterday. He was exceptionally helpful." Sarah's apprehension eased slightly, replaced by a lingering puzzlement. "Yes, he told me. He said you gave him $50. That was very generous, sir." "It was the least I could do," Alistair replied, his gaze sweeping over the small porch, the worn mat, the visible signs of a life lived on the margins. May we come in? I'd like to speak with you properly if you have a moment. Sarah hesitated. Her small apartment was clean, but it was humble. She felt a blush rise to her cheeks, embarrassed by the stark contrast between her world and his. But he was here, on her porch, and he had helped Elijah. "Of course, sir. Please come in," she said, opening the door wider. Alistair and Brenda stepped inside, and the small living room immediately felt even smaller. The worn sofa, the faded curtains, the television set that often struggled with reception, everything seemed to shrink under the gaze of this powerful man. Elijah, who had been hiding slightly behind his mother's legs, now stepped forward, a surprised but pleased expression on his face. "Mr. Sterling," he exclaimed, genuinely happy to see him. "Elijah," Alistair said, a genuine smile replacing his formal one. "Good to see you again, my boy." Sarah gestured awkwardly to the sofa. "Please, have a seat." Alistair and Brenda sat down, looking a little stiff on the old cushions. Sarah sat opposite them, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her heart still racing. Elijah perched on the armrest next to his mother, his curiosity overcoming his initial shyness. "Mrs. Carter," Alistair began, his voice calm and measured, "I wouldn't normally impose like this, but what your son did yesterday, it truly impressed me. He showed remarkable initiative, intelligence, and integrity. He refused payment for helping a stranger. He spoke of you, of how hard you work, and how he collects cans to help you." Sarah's cheeks flushed again, this time with a mix of pride and a touch of defensiveness. She didn't want him to think they were beggars. "Elijah's a good boy, sir. He knows the value of hard work. We make do." "I have no doubt," Alistair said gently. "But Mrs. Carter, I've been very fortunate in my life, and observing Elijah yesterday, it made me realize something important. Talent, character, and potential aren't limited to any particular zip code or circumstance. They exist everywhere." He leaned forward slightly, his gaze earnest. "What I want to propose, Mrs. Carter, is not charity. It's an investment in potential. I believe Elijah has a remarkable mind and a heart of gold. I want to offer him an opportunity." Sarah looked from Alistair to Elijah, then back again, her mind reeling. "An opportunity? What kind of opportunity?" "I want to sponsor Elijah," Alistair continued, his voice gaining a quiet intensity. "Completely. I want to ensure he has access to the best education possible, not just for a year, but through high school, and if he wishes, through college. I want to provide him with resources, books, tutors, anything he needs to thrive academically. I want to open doors for him that might otherwise remain closed." Silence descended upon the small living room, broken only by the faint hum of the refrigerator. Sarah stared at Alistair, her jaw slack. Elijah's eyes, usually so sharp and observant, were wide, unblinking. "Mr. Sterling," Sarah finally managed, her voice choked with emotion. I don't understand. Why? Why would you do this for us?" Alistair offered a small, knowing smile. "Because, Mrs. Carter, your son helped me when I was in a bind, and he did so without expectation, with a genuine desire to be useful. That is a rare quality, one worth nurturing. And frankly," he added, a hint of his usual sharp wit returning, "I believe in paying my debts, especially to those who don't ask for anything in return." He paused, letting his words sink in. "This would be entirely confidential, no strings attached to you or Elijah. He would simply have the chance to excel, to reach his full potential. He wouldn't have to worry about collecting cans anymore, or about whether there's enough money for school supplies. He could just be a kid and learn. Elijah, who had remained silent, suddenly spoke, his voice filled with an almost desperate hope. "Does that mean I could get that science kit, Mama? And maybe a real telescope?" Alistair chuckled, a rich, warm sound. "Elijah, my boy, if your mama agrees, you can have all the science kits and telescopes your heart desires." Sarah's eyes welled up. She looked at her son, his face alight with a joy she hadn't seen in years, a pure, unburdened hope. She thought of all the struggles, the sacrifices, the endless worry about how she would provide for him. And here, in her humble living room, stood a man offering to lift that burden, not as a handout, but as an act of profound respect. "Mr. Sterling," she whispered, a tear finally tracing a path down her cheek. "Yes, thank you. From the bottom of my heart, thank you." Alistair smiled, a genuine, content smile. He had made many deals in his life, acquired countless assets. But this, he realized, this felt like the most significant investment he had ever made. The days that followed Alistair Sterling's visit to Northwood were a whirlwind of quiet, life-altering changes for Elijah and Sarah. Brenda, Alistair's assistant, became the point person, handling the logistics with discreet efficiency. First, there was the enrollment. Elijah was to attend Northwood Academy, a prestigious private school on the other side of town, known for its rigorous academic program and state-of-the-art facilities. Sarah had only ever heard whispers of it, a place reserved for the children of the city's elite. The tuition alone was more than Sarah made in a year. Brenda handled all the paperwork, the entrance exams, the interviews. Elijah, though a little intimidated by the grand buildings and the polished halls, approached it with his characteristic quiet determination. He passed the entrance exams with flying colors, his natural intelligence shining through. Then came the supplies. Brenda arrived one afternoon with boxes filled with new school uniforms, crisp notebooks, a brand new backpack that smelled of fresh canvas, and a dazzling array of art supplies, and, to Elijah's boundless delight, a high-powered telescope and a comprehensive science kit, complete with a microscope. The sight of these treasures brought tears to Sarah's eyes. It wasn't just the items. It was the promise they held, the validation of Elijah's dreams. "Mr. Sterling wants to make sure you have everything you need to succeed, Elijah," Brenda explained, her usually stoic face softened by a small smile. "No compromises." Elijah couldn't stop touching the smooth barrel of the telescope, peering through the microscope at a speck of dust, imagining distant galaxies and microscopic worlds. This was more than he had ever dared to dream. A car service, a discreet black sedan, began picking Elijah up each morning, taking him across town to Northwood Academy and bringing him back in the afternoon. It felt strange at first, sitting in the plush back seat, watching his old neighborhood recede in the rearview mirror. But the journey quickly became a time for quiet contemplation, for reviewing his notes, or simply marveling at the passing landscape. The first few weeks at Northwood Academy were challenging. The curriculum was demanding, the pace relentless. The other students, mostly from privileged backgrounds, were initially curious, some friendly, some aloof. Elijah was acutely aware of his differences, his simpler clothes, even in uniform, his unfamiliarity with certain cultural references, the way he spoke sometimes. He worked twice as hard, poring over textbooks late into the night, determined not to let Mr. Sterling or his mama down. His favorite class was science, of course. His teacher, Mrs. Albright, a kindly woman with spectacles perched on her nose, quickly recognized his passion and aptitude. He absorbed everything, asking insightful questions, his eyes alight with curiosity. He spent hours in the school's well-equipped science lab, conducting experiments that had only existed in his imagination until now. He also found a surprising solace in the school library, a vast, quiet sanctuary filled with books on every conceivable subject. He devoured them, losing himself in stories of explorers, inventors, and groundbreaking discoveries. He learned about history, art, and literature, expanding his worldview far beyond the confines of Northwood. Alistair Sterling, true to his word, remained a silent partner, but a very attentive one. He received regular reports from Brenda on Elijah's academic progress, which were consistently glowing. Occasionally, a discreet package would arrive. A rare science book he'd mentioned to Mrs. Albright, a new pair of comfortable, high-quality sneakers for gym class, or tickets to a museum exhibit he'd expressed interest in. These gestures were never extravagant, always thoughtful, tailored to Elijah's specific needs and burgeoning interests. Once a month, Brenda would arrange a meeting, usually at a quiet cafe away from the school, where Alistair would meet with Elijah. These weren't formal interrogations, but genuine conversations. Alistair would ask about his classes, his friends, his challenges, his dreams. He would listen intently, offering advice, sharing anecdotes from his own life, but always making it clear that the decisions about Elijah's path were ultimately his and Sarah's. During one such meeting, Elijah nervously confessed that he was struggling a little with advanced calculus. "It's just so many numbers, Mr. Sterling, and I feel like everyone else just gets it." Alistair smiled. "Elijah, even the most complex structures are built brick by brick. Don't be afraid to ask for help. It's a sign of strength, not weakness, to know when you need guidance." He looked at Brenda. "Brenda, let's arrange for a tutor for Elijah, specifically for calculus. Someone who can break it down, make it understandable." And just like that, a tutor appeared, a brilliant retired math professor who patiently guided Elijah through the complexities of calculus, transforming his struggle into a deep understanding. Meanwhile, Sarah also experienced a quiet transformation. With Elijah's expenses covered and the burden of his future lifted, she was able to cut back on her second job. The lines of fatigue around her eyes began to soften. She had more time to rest, more time to spend with Elijah. She volunteered at a local community center, helping other single mothers, sharing her story of unexpected blessings. She never spoke of Alistair Sterling by name, only of a kind gentleman who saw potential in my son. Their apartment, though still small, felt lighter, filled with a new kind of hope. Elijah no longer had to scavenge for cans, but he still, on occasion, volunteered at the local soup kitchen, remembering his mama's words, "If you can help someone, you help them." Years passed. Elijah grew taller, his voice deepened, his young man's frame gaining strength. Northwood Academy became his second home. He excelled in every subject, especially science and mathematics. He joined the debate team, surprising himself with his eloquent arguments, honed by years of quiet observation and careful thought. He played basketball not as a star player, but as a dedicated team member, valued for his strategic thinking and calm demeanor under pressure. He made friends, genuine ones, who saw past his humble beginnings to the brilliant, kind, and funny young man he had become. He never forgot where he came from, often inviting his friends from the academy to Northwood, showing them the vibrant murals, the bustling markets, the heart of his community. He was a bridge between two worlds, comfortable in both. Alistair Sterling watched his protege with a growing sense of pride. Elijah was not just smart, he was well-rounded, compassionate, and grounded. He saw flashes of his younger self in Elijah, the relentless drive, the thirst for knowledge, but also a gentleness, a moral compass that Alistair sometimes felt he had lost along the way. Their monthly meetings had evolved into genuine mentorship sessions, Alistair sharing his vast knowledge of business, leadership, and the complexities of the world, and Elijah, in turn, often surprising Alistair with his fresh perspectives and unwavering optimism. When it came time for college applications, the choices were abundant. Elite universities across the country vied for Elijah's attention. He applied to several, but his heart was set on MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He wanted to study engineering, to build things, to solve problems, to innovate. The acceptance letter from MIT arrived on a crisp autumn morning, a thick envelope that felt heavier than any gold. Sarah wept with joy, hugging Elijah so tightly he could barely breathe. Alistair, when Brenda informed him, simply smiled and murmured, "Excellent. I had no doubt." The day Elijah left for college was bittersweet. Sarah helped him pack his modest belongings, her heart bursting with pride and a pang of longing. Alistair arranged for a private jet, a gesture that initially overwhelmed Elijah, but Alistair insisted, "Think of it as a head start, Elijah. You have a long journey ahead." As the jet ascended, carrying him away from the familiar skyline of his city, away from Northwood and Crestwood, Elijah looked down. He saw the patchwork of neighborhoods, the winding streets, the tiny specks that were houses. He thought of the rickety red wagon, the flat tire, the kindness of a stranger. He thought of his mama, her tireless strength, her unwavering love. And he thought of Mr. Sterling, the man who had seen something in him, something even he hadn't fully recognized, and had given him the wings to soar. His life had been changed forever indeed. But the story was far from over. This was just the beginning of Elijah's journey, a journey that would lead him to heights he once could only dream of, and a journey where he would, in turn, pay forward the extraordinary kindness he had received. Cambridge, Massachusetts, hit Elijah like a vibrant intellectual tidal wave. MIT was everything he had imagined and more, a crucible of brilliant minds, ceaseless innovation, and a palpable energy that hummed with discovery. From the moment he stepped onto the historic campus, he knew he was exactly where he was meant to be. His first year was a blur of challenging coursework, late-night study sessions in the library, and the exhilarating thrill of grasping complex concepts. He delved into mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, and computer science, finding each discipline fascinating in its own right. He absorbed knowledge like a sponge, his innate curiosity driving him to excel. While some of his peers buckled under the pressure, Elijah thrived. He was accustomed to hard work, to pushing past perceived limits. The challenges at MIT felt like exhilarating puzzles rather than insurmountable obstacles. He found a supportive community among his classmates, many of whom were just as passionate and driven as he was. He formed study groups, debating theorems and algorithms long after the professors had packed up for the day. He learned to code with a fluency that astonished him, translating abstract ideas into tangible programs. He spent countless hours in the labs, designing, building, and breaking things, learning from every failure. His connection with Mr. Sterling remained a quiet, steadfast presence. Every few weeks, Alistair would call, not to check up on his grades, but to genuinely inquire about his well-being, his aspirations, and any new ideas sparking in his mind. Elijah would share his frustrations, his triumphs, and the burgeoning concepts that kept him awake at night. "I'm really interested in sustainable energy, Mr. Sterling," Elijah shared during one call in his sophomore year. "Especially how we can make renewable energy more accessible to underserved communities. It just feels wrong that the people who often need it most are the last to get it." Alistair listened, his interest piqued. "An admirable goal, Elijah. The market for sustainable energy is vast, and the social impact could be even greater. Have you considered looking into microgrids? Or perhaps off-grid solutions for remote areas?" These conversations were invaluable. Alistair, with his decades of experience in business and finance, could cut through the theoretical and offer practical insights, helping Elijah bridge the gap between academic concepts and real-world application. He challenged Elijah to think not just as an engineer, but as an entrepreneur, a problem solver on a grand scale. During his junior year, Elijah joined a student project focused on developing low-cost modular solar panels designed for easy installation in areas with unreliable power grids. It was a passion project that consumed his free time. He worked with a diverse team of students, some older, some younger, all equally committed to using their skills for social good. He learned about project management, teamwork, and the frustrating realities of sourcing materials and securing funding, even for a nonprofit initiative. The team faced numerous setbacks, prototypes that failed, components that arrived damaged, design flaws that required complete overhauls. There were moments of doubt, moments when Elijah wondered if their ambitious goal was truly achievable. But then he would remember the flat tire, the unwavering generosity of Mr. Sterling, and his mama's quiet strength. He remembered the feeling of responsibility, of wanting to contribute, to lift up others as he had been lifted. He spent one summer interning at a leading renewable energy company, an opportunity arranged by Alistair. He gained invaluable practical experience working alongside seasoned engineers, witnessing the complexities of large-scale energy projects. He absorbed every detail, asking 1,000 questions, his mind buzzing with ideas. He saw the gaps, the inefficiencies, the areas where innovation could truly make a difference, particularly for communities that lack the robust infrastructure of developed areas. His senior year culminated in his capstone project, a highly efficient portable solar charging unit designed specifically for emergency relief and underserved urban areas. It was compact, durable, and capable of powering essential devices and even small medical equipment. He poured his heart and soul into the design, drawing on everything he had learned at MIT and during his internship. On presentation day, Elijah stood before a panel of professors and industry professionals, his heart pounding but his voice steady. He explained the technical specifications, the cost-effectiveness, and the profound social impact his invention could have. He spoke not just of wattage and circuits, but of children being able to study after dark, of families being able to communicate during blackouts, of communities gaining a measure of energy independence. The panel was impressed, not just by the technical brilliance of his design, but by the passion and conviction in his voice. He received top honors for his project, and several companies immediately expressed interest in licensing his technology. He called his mama that night, her joyful tears echoing his own quiet triumph. And then he called Mr. Sterling. "Elijah, my boy, I always knew you had it in you," Alistair said, his voice filled with genuine warmth. "This is just the beginning. What's next for you?" Elijah paused, looking out his dorm room window at the twinkling lights of Cambridge. He had offers from prestigious tech firms, lucrative positions that promised rapid career advancement and substantial salaries. But something within him tugged in a different direction. "I'm not sure yet, Mr. Sterling," he admitted, "but I know one thing. I want to build something that truly makes a difference, something that helps people, especially in places like Northwood." Alistair was silent for a moment. "A noble ambition, Elijah, and a challenging one. The path of social innovation is often less glamorous and certainly less immediately profitable than corporate engineering. Are you prepared for that?" "I am, sir," Elijah said, his voice firm. "I wouldn't be here, wouldn't have this chance if it weren't for someone believing in potential. I want to be that for others." Alistair chuckled softly. "Then you have my full support, Elijah. Always. Whatever path you choose, know that I'll be watching and I'll be ready to help in any way I can." Graduation day was a kaleidoscope of caps and gowns, proud families, and the infectious optimism of youth. Sarah sat in the front row, beaming, tears of joy streaming down her face as she watched her son, Elijah Carter, walk across the stage to receive his degree from MIT. Alistair Sterling, seated discreetly beside her, watched with an equally profound sense of satisfaction. His investment, he thought, had yielded a return far beyond any financial metric. After the ceremony, there were hugs and congratulations. Alistair greeted Elijah with a firm handshake and a clap on the shoulder. "Congratulations, Engineer Carter," he said, a rare twinkle in his eye. "You've made us all incredibly proud." "Thank you, Mr. Sterling," Elijah replied, his voice thick with emotion. "I couldn't have done it without you." "Nonsense," Alistair demurred. "I simply cleared a path. You did the climbing." Over the next few months, Elijah diligently explored his options. He had multiple job offers from top-tier tech companies, some even wanting to fund his solar charging unit project. The allure of Silicon Valley, with its vibrant innovation and seemingly limitless resources, was strong. But the pull of Northwood, the community that had shaped him, was stronger. He spent weeks back in his old neighborhood, walking the familiar streets, talking to community leaders, small business owners, and families. He saw the persistent issues: unreliable electricity, limited access to technology, outdated infrastructure, and a general lack of resources compared to more affluent areas. He realized that while his portable solar charger was a good start, Northwood needed something more systemic, a broader approach to sustainable development. During one of his regular meetings with Alistair, Elijah laid out his vision. "I want to start a non-profit, Mr. Sterling. I want to call it Catalyst Solutions. Our mission would be to bring sustainable energy and technology solutions to underserved urban communities, starting with Northwood. We could install community solar arrays, set up public Wi-Fi hubs powered by renewables, and even create vocational training programs for residents to learn how to install and maintain these systems. Alistair listened intently, occasionally nodding. A formidable undertaking, Elijah. And you're proposing to start this from scratch rather than joining an established organization? Yes, sir, Elijah confirmed, his gaze unwavering. I believe we need a tailored approach. Northwood has unique challenges, and I want to work directly with the community to build solutions that truly fit their needs, not just generic ones. And the funding? Alistair asked, ever the pragmatist. A venture of this scale will require significant capital, even for a non-profit. Elijah outlined his plan, seeking grants from foundations, crowdfunding, and potentially attracting philanthropic investors. He had done his homework, demonstrating a grasp of not just the engineering, but also the business and logistical challenges. Alistair leaned back in his chair, a thoughtful expression on his face. He had seen countless business proposals over the years, many of them brilliant, but few imbued with such genuine passion and clear social purpose. He saw in Elijah not just an engineer, but a leader, a visionary. Elijah, Alistair finally said, I believe in you. I've seen your dedication, your intellect, and your unwavering commitment to doing good. Consider Sterling Innovations to be Catalyst Solutions' first major investor. We won't just provide seed funding, we'll provide strategic guidance, legal support, and whatever resources we can reasonably offer to help you get off the ground. But, he added, a stern glint in his eye, I expect results, and I expect you to maintain the highest standards of integrity and efficiency. Elijah's breath caught in his throat. He had hoped for some advice, perhaps a small donation, but this was beyond anything he had dared to ask for. Mr. Sterling, that's incredible. Thank you. Don't thank me, Elijah, Alistair said, a rare, almost vulnerable smile gracing his lips. You're giving me an opportunity to invest in something truly meaningful, something beyond profit margins. And frankly, it's about time. With Sterling Innovations' backing, Catalyst Solutions was no longer just a dream. It became a tangible entity. Alistair assigned a small team from his own company, a project manager, a legal advisor, and a financial specialist to help Elijah navigate the initial complexities of setting up a nonprofit. Brenda, ever efficient, ensured that all the bureaucratic hurdles were cleared with remarkable speed. Elijah set up a small office in Northwood, a modest space in a renovated community center. He hired a small, dedicated team of young engineers and community organizers, many of them also passionate about social impact. He spent his days in meetings with community councils, listening to residents, understanding their needs, and explaining the benefits of renewable energy and technology. His mother, Sarah, was his fiercest supporter and often his most honest critic. Remember who you're doing this for, Eli, she would remind him. Don't let the big plans make you forget the small, everyday struggles. Elijah remembered. He made sure to include community members in every step of the planning process, from choosing locations for solar panels to designing the vocational training curriculum. He wanted Catalyst Solutions to be their solution, built with them, not just for them. The journey wouldn't be easy, he knew. There would be resistance, skepticism, and unforeseen obstacles. But as he looked around his burgeoning office, seeing the faces of his dedicated team, he felt a surge of hope. He was home, and he was finally building the bridge between the two worlds he knew so intimately. Elijah's decision to establish Catalyst Solutions in Northwood, rather than pursuing a lucrative career in a corporate giant, raised a few eyebrows among his MIT peers and even some of Alistair's more cynical business associates. They saw it as a wasted opportunity, a promising talent choosing a less profitable, more challenging path. But Elijah knew, deep in his bones, that this was his true calling. Returning to Northwood wasn't just about professional ambition. It was about coming home. The familiar sights and sounds enveloped him. The lively street vendors, the scent of diverse cuisines wafting from small restaurants, the vibrant graffiti art that adorned alleyways, telling stories of struggle and resilience. Yet he also saw the stark realities that lingered: the aging infrastructure, the flickering streetlights, the limited access to reliable internet, the vacant lots that promised potential but delivered neglect. He reconnected with old friends, some of whom still lived in the neighborhood, struggling to find stable employment or opportunities for growth. He learned about the challenges facing his community firsthand, confirming his belief that real solutions needed to be developed from within. His first major project for Catalyst Solutions was ambitious: to transform an abandoned, dilapidated community center into a sustainable community hub. This hub would serve as a model for renewable energy integration, housing a large rooftop solar array that would power the center itself and feed excess energy back into the local grid, potentially reducing electricity costs for surrounding homes. It would also feature a public Wi-Fi lounge, computer lab, and classrooms for vocational training in solar panel installation and maintenance. Elijah knew he couldn't do it alone. He began by rallying local support. He attended community meetings, patiently explaining his vision, using simple language to demystify complex engineering concepts. He emphasized the long-term benefits: lower utility bills, cleaner energy, job creation, and improved access to technology. He brought in his small team from Catalyst Solutions, whose youthful enthusiasm and genuine commitment quickly won over many residents. One of his earliest and most vocal supporters was Mrs. Jenkins, a wise elderly woman who ran the local community garden. She remembered Elijah as a quiet boy with a bright mind. "Eli, you come back to help your people," she said, her voice raspy but firm. "That means something. We'll help you, child." Mrs. Jenkins connected him with other community elders, influential figures who had seen countless programs come and go. Their initial skepticism was slowly chipped away by Elijah's sincerity, his detailed plans, and the tangible support from Sterling Innovations that Alistair had quietly ensured was visible in the early stages. Proper legal setup, initial architectural renderings, and a transparent budget. Securing the vacant community center property was the first bureaucratic hurdle. It was owned by the city, and navigating municipal regulations was a labyrinthine process. Elijah spent weeks filling out forms, attending planning commission meetings, and presenting his proposal to various city departments. He drew on the advice of Sterling Innovations' legal team, who provided invaluable guidance on property acquisition, zoning laws, and permits. He also faced the challenge of raising additional funds. While Alistair's initial investment was substantial, the hub project required more. He applied for grants from environmental foundations, pitched to local businesses, and even launched a modest crowdfunding campaign. leveraging his story and the potential impact on Northwood. He learned quickly that the world of nonprofit development was just as demanding, if not more so, than the corporate world. There were constant negotiations, unexpected delays, and moments of profound frustration. But every time he felt discouraged, he thought of the faces of the community members who believed in him, the hopeful eyes of the children who would benefit from the hub, and the unwavering belief of Mr. Sterling. The renovation of the old community center into the Catalyst Solutions Hub was a testament to Elijah's perseverance and the power of community collaboration. It wasn't just a construction project, it was a symbol of renewed hope for Northwood. Elijah hired local contractors and laborers whenever possible, providing much-needed jobs within the community. He insisted on transparency, holding weekly open meetings at the construction site where residents could see the progress, ask questions, and even offer suggestions. Children from the neighborhood would often gather at the fence, their faces pressed against the chain link, watching the transformation unfold with wide-eyed wonder. The installation of the solar array was a particularly proud moment. Under Elijah's direct supervision, local trainees, many of whom had previously struggled to find consistent work, learned how to mount the panels, connect the wiring, and understand the intricacies of renewable energy systems. He taught them patiently, explaining the science behind each step, empowering them with new skills. When the first panel clicked into place, catching the sunlight and instantly showing a power reading on the inverter, a cheer erupted from the assembled onlookers. Inside the hub, the transformation was equally dramatic. The dilapidated interior was reborn as a bright, modern space. The public Wi-Fi lounge buzzed with activity as residents, many connecting to high-speed internet for the first time, accessed online resources, applied for jobs, or simply video-called distant relatives. The computer lab, equipped with donated refurbished computers and high-speed internet, hosted classes on digital literacy, coding basics, and online job search skills. The vocational training classrooms were quickly filled with eager students, young and old, learning about sustainable energy and other trades. One of the most touching aspects for Elijah was witnessing the impact on the children. The hub's after-school programs provided a safe, stimulating environment. He often saw kids in the computer lab, exploring educational games or researching school projects, their faces illuminated by the screens. The Science Corner, stocked with donated equipment and supervised by volunteers, became a popular spot where children could conduct simple experiments, their eyes gleaming with curiosity, just like his once had been. The success of the Catalyst Solutions Hub didn't go unnoticed. Local news channels ran stories highlighting Elijah's journey from a 10-year-old helping a millionaire to a visionary leading community revitalization. Politicians, initially hesitant, now sought to be associated with the project, praising its innovative approach to urban development. Alistair Sterling, watching from afar, felt a quiet pride swelling within him. He saw Elijah not just fulfilling his own potential, but unlocking the potential of an entire community. He knew that the true measure of a man's life wasn't in the billions he accumulated, but in the positive impact he had on the lives of others. And Elijah was making an impact far greater than Alistair could have ever imagined. Despite the initial triumph of the Catalyst Solutions Hub, Elijah was realistic. He knew that the path of social innovation was fraught with challenges, And Northwood was no exception. The honeymoon period was over, and the real work, with its inevitable obstacles, was just beginning. One of the first significant hurdles was sustaining funding. While Sterling Innovations provided a crucial initial boost and the crowdfunding campaign had been successful, grants were often project-specific and required constant reapplication. Elijah quickly learned that securing long-term diverse funding streams was an ongoing battle. He spent countless hours writing grant proposals, networking with philanthropists, and pitching to potential corporate sponsors. He faced rejections, bureaucratic delays, and the frustrating reality that many funders preferred to invest in safe projects with guaranteed quantifiable returns, rather than the often messy, long-term work of community transformation. Another challenge arose from community engagement. While many residents embraced the hub, some remained skeptical. Decades of unfulfilled promises and failed programs had bred a deep-seated distrust of outside initiatives. Elijah encountered individuals who believed his project was just another fleeting attempt, or worse, a scheme to exploit their community. He had to patiently, persistently build trust, proving through consistent action and transparent communication that Catalyst Solutions was truly committed to their well-being. This often meant dealing with miscommunications, resolving conflicts, and adapting plans based on community feedback, even when it meant redesigning aspects of the project. Infrastructure issues also proved to be more complex than initially anticipated. While the hub was a shining example of modern infrastructure, the surrounding neighborhood still struggled with aging power grids, unreliable water systems, and inadequate waste management. Elijah realized that truly transforming Northwood would require addressing these deeper, systemic problems, which were far beyond the scope of Catalyst Solutions alone. He began advocating to the city government for broader infrastructure investments, often facing bureaucratic inertia and political indifference. Then came the unexpected setback of a local gang conflict. Tensions flared in a part of Northwood, leading to increased crime and a sense of unease. While the Catalyst Solutions Hub offered a safe haven, the broader instability threatened to undermine the progress being made. Parents became hesitant to send their children to after-school programs, and some vocational trainees dropped out, fearing for their safety. Elijah was devastated. He had poured his heart into creating a positive force in the community, and now it felt threatened by forces beyond his control. He debated whether to temporarily halt some programs or to try and push through. He called Alistair Sterling, his voice heavy with discouragement. "Mr. Sterling, it feels like every step forward is met with 2 steps back. The funding is a constant worry. Some people still don't trust us, and now this gang conflict, I'm not sure how to keep moving forward." Alistair listened patiently. His wisdom gleaned from decades of navigating corporate crises. "Elijah," he said, his voice calm and steady, "every significant endeavor, whether in business or social impact, faces resistance. Obstacles are not signs of failure. They are tests of resolve. You cannot control the actions of every individual or every external factor, but you can control your response." "What do I do then?" Elijah asked, desperate for guidance. "You adapt," Alistair advised. "You build stronger alliances. You listen more intently. You find innovative ways to overcome these specific challenges. And critically, Elijah, you remember why you started. What was the core problem you sought to solve? Does that problem still exist? If so, then your work is still necessary. He paused. Regarding the gang conflict, perhaps Catalyst Solutions needs to expand its scope, not just physically, but socially. Can you engage with the youth at risk? Can you offer alternative pathways, educational programs, or mentorship that directly addresses the root causes of their involvement? It's not just about solar panels, Elijah. It's about providing opportunity, hope, and a sense of belonging. Alistair's words resonated deeply. He was right. It wasn't just about the technology. It was about the people. Elijah realized he had to integrate more deeply into the social fabric of Northwood to become not just an engineer, but a community builder, a peace broker, and a beacon of hope. He hung up the phone, a renewed sense of purpose replacing his earlier despair. The challenges were immense, but so was the potential for change. And he knew unequivocally that he wouldn't give up on Northwood. I've continued the story through Chapter 10, detailing Elijah's experiences at MIT, his decision to return to Northwood, the launch of Catalyst Solutions, the establishment of the Sustainable Community Hub, and the early challenges he faces. The narrative now stands at a point where Elijah is grappling with the realities of community development. I will continue writing the next sections of the story. Please let me know if you would like me to focus on any particular aspects or introduce new characters.